Hello, class. I want to take some time to talk about plagiarizing and how to avoid plagiarizing. There's a few key things that you need to know when you are using outside sources and trying to incorporate them into your essays. Really, what you want to do is you want to consider paraphrasing, summarizing, and quoting. You'll often see me refer to this as PSQ in different assignments throughout the rest of the semester. But when you really take the time to learn how to effectively use these three tools and incorporate them into your writing will really become much stronger. Okay, first of all, how to use them. What you really want to do is you want to read the entire text and note the key points and main ideas. Before you actually start to try to find quotes or try to paraphrase different sections, you really want to read the entire text first. It gives you an overall impression of what the article is saying as a whole, because sometimes it could change as you're reading. From the title might be somewhat misleading, so don't necessarily go from that. And also, it just really helps you as you're going through to identify the key things that you may want to utilize. If you have a print version of whatever the text is, if you print out, say, an article that you have found on EBSCO, you might want to, as you're reading, just highlight some key things that you think are important. Some people like to have, whether it's a book or maybe it's something on screen, they like to actually take notes, whether you do that through handwriting or typing. But doing that as you go through, noting those key points and main ideas will help you then to know which parts you would want to potentially paraphrase, quote, or summarize. Okay, so really some of the differences, they're listed here, but I'm going to get into some more detail in the rest of this PowerPoint. So rather than go through them all right here, I'll go into detail as I hit on each particular one. Okay, so what are the differences? Paraphrasing. Paraphrasing involves putting a passage from source material into your own words. So really what it is you take an original passage, and it's probably no more than maybe 2 or 3 sentences long, generally speaking. That's not a rule, but it's probably a good guideline. And a paraphrase is you reading that, put it to the side, and then rewrite it in your own words. So it shows that you understand and are processing. Teachers prefer you to paraphrase and to just directly quote because it shows us that you have taken time to process information and that you're not just simply cutting and pasting information. So you're going to see I'm going to start requiring you to paraphrase, and I will want to see more paraphrasing than quoting for that very reason. But a paraphrase, because it comes from another source, has to be attributed to the original source. You still have to cite that source. It's usually a little bit shorter than the original passage, but not as short as a summary will be, and we'll talk about that later. So it's your own rendition of essential information and ideas expressed by someone else presented in a new form. And again, it's one legitimate way when accompanied by accurate documentation to borrow from a source. It's really more detailed than a summary, which the summary, and we'll talk about that, only focuses on the main idea. So it's better than quoting from information from an undistinguished passage, because the only reason you would choose to quote is because the original is so well said that you can't possibly change the way it's said. And it helps you control the temptation to quote too much. That's really a big one. The temptation to quote. Students tend to want to cut and paste, especially where everything's available to you digitally. So we want to try to curb that temptation, and paraphrasing really forces your hand at that a little bit more. Okay, so right here you have the original passage. The General Assembly should act to allow judges to impose capital punishment without requiring all 12 jurors to agree on death. All 12 should agree on guilt, but the penalty phase should be a simple recommendation to the judge who could impose the appropriate penalty. And then you notice there's a citation here. Okay, a paraphrase of that is right here. The state government should make a law so that jurors can decide the death penalty without 12 jurors agreeing. The jurors should all agree the criminal is guilty, but the final punishments should be left up to the judge. You notice I have all of the main ideas here, but I don't necessarily name the specifics. Like I don't have anything about the General Assembly should act to allow judges to impose capital punishment. Instead, I've changed it to the state government should make a law so that jurors can decide the death penalty. And right here, without requiring all 12 jurors to agree on death. And so without 12 jurors agreeing. So it's the same idea, right? But I've just changed the words. I've said it in my own words. Right here, all 12 should agree on guilt, but the penalty phase should be a simple recommendation to the judge who can impose the appropriate penalty. And then changing it down here, the jurors should all agree the criminal is guilty. Same general idea as what was set up here. But the final punishment should be left up to the judge. And again, right here, it's really the same idea. I've just changed the wording, said it in my own words. And I'm still citing that source. You'll also notice, and I'll point this out to you a few times, that this citation here, Wooten, matches up with the very first thing on this line. And I will show you that repeatedly as we go through citing your sources. Okay. Moving on from paraphrasing, we have summarizing. Summarizing involves putting the main ideas into your own words, including only the main points. Once again, it's necessary to attribute summarized ideas to the original source. They're significantly shorter than the original, and they take a broad overview of the source material. So when you think about a summary of something, you want to think about it's about 10% of the original. So that means if you have about 100 words, you maybe are summarizing it in 10. It's only the key idea, the main idea of what it's about. There are not details included. It really is an overall, okay, I just read this entire paragraph. What is it about? What's the main idea of that paragraph? That is a summary. But you still need to cite summaries. So again, using the exact same paragraph that I used in the last one about capital punishment, right here, I've boiled it all down into one sentence, okay? So this is actually a title. So right here, laws should be changed so that a person who is unanimously found guilty by a jury can be sentenced to death by the judge. That's the main idea, right? So there you go. But because I still got it from another source, I still have to cite. So you'll notice I still have the citation here, Wooten, which still matches up with the one down here. Okay, moving on. Quotes. A quote must be identical to the original using a narrow segment of the source. You do not need to use long quotes. There's something called a block quote that can occasionally be used in writing. A block quote is when the quote from the original is 4 or more lines, typed lines long. And then there's a different way of formatting it, and we'll go over that in a different lesson. In this essay, you may not use block quotes for the cause and effect essay. And really the reason for that is there is generally not a reason to have to use a block quote when you have an essay that's only 3 to 5 pages long. Block quotes mean that you've done really extensive research and that there are sometimes longer passages that you need to incorporate. And generally they're reserved for papers that are much longer in length. Students tend to like to use them to fill up space, and teachers are very aware of that. So a lot of times we will just nix them all together. And in this particular case, I am doing that. So make sure that you know you cannot use a quote. Okay, so quoting. Quoting has to be exact to the original. However, it does not need to be the entire part, and really it's recommended that it is not. So right here, again, using the exact same sample up here that we've been using for the previous two for looking at paraphrasing and summarizing. What I have here is I'm using a quote. So if the state government makes a law that allows judges to decide on the death penalty without jury unity, quote, the penalty phase should be a simple recommendation to the judge. Okay, right here. The penalty phase should be a simple recommendation to the judge, thereby speeding up the process and allowing jurors to rid themselves of the proverbial blood on their hands. This right here is an interpretation of what I'm talking about up here. I'm using a direct quote because I decided that this passage was great and I needed to use this exact wording. But you don't quote the entire thing. There's no reason for you to have to do that. Okay, but you'll also notice that I still have a citation at the end, and also notice that the citation is at the end of the entire sentence, not directly after the quote. So that quote ends here, but I continue my sentence. At the end of the sentence, that's where I have my citation. You'll notice that I have the parentheses, and then the name, and then close parentheses, and then the period right there at the end. And that is a great way of incorporating a quote. You don't necessarily need a lot. You just have maybe a part of a sentence, maybe a whole sentence, and you incorporate that in with your own interpretation of what is going on here. Okay, why and when? Writers frequently intertwine summaries, paraphrases, and quotes as part of a summary of an article, a chapter, or a book. A writer might include paraphrases of various key points blended with quotes of striking or suggestive phrases, as in the following example. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you I actually use all of these pieces together. Okay, according to Jim Wooten in his article, The Death Penalty, Fix What's Broken, there's a law that needs to be changed that will make the process of sentencing more streamlined. Okay, right here is a summary. The jurors should all agree the criminal is guilty, but the final punishment should be left up to the judge. Again, still in here with a summary. If the state government makes a law that allows judges to decide on the death penalty, quote, the penalty phase should be a simple recommendation to the judge, right, end quote, thereby speeding up the process and allowing the jurors to rid themselves of the proverbial blood on their hands. Okay, I want you to note a few things. And sorry, I said that this was a summary, but this is a paraphrase, the part in blue. Okay, but moving beyond that, I want you to note a few things. You notice I've done all of those things within this particular passage, but I also want you to note something else. Technically, after each part where I am talking about the original, I should, after this sentence right here, I should have to put a citation that looks like this, Wooten, right? And then I should have to do it again after this one, right? Because I'm doing the same thing up here because I'm talking about it, but not really. And here's why. Okay, first of all, I introduce the author and the title of the article. If you do either one, introduce the author or the name of the article, then you don't have to have a citation at the end of that sentence. So for this sentence in and of itself, because I have the author and the title, I don't need a citation at the end. I've already basically cited it within the sentence itself. Okay, why don't I have to have one after this sentence as well, you ask? I'm so glad you did. Okay, what I've done here is I've used what's called the sandwiching method. Think of it as a sandwich. Okay, right here, I have the author. That's one piece of bread. In here, all of this is the meat. I've got meat, I've got some lettuce, I've got some nice tomato, all that other stuff all in here. And then right down here at the end, I have the other piece of bread that's holding it all together. It doesn't matter how long your paragraph is, as long as no other source breaks up your information, whether you're paraphrasing, summarizing, or quoting, if you introduce the author at the beginning and then close it off with a citation at the end, you have done what you need to do. You are citing it. Some people like to go a little overboard. They do like to cite after every sentence, and you can technically do that even if you sandwich, but it's a little bit less cumbersome if you do it this way. Okay, so that's really all I need to point out for paraphrasing, summarizing, and quoting. You guys are going to practice that in I have an article that you're going to read, and then you're going to practice those skills using that article, and then you're also going to utilize them in your actual essays. But I just wanted to point out a few of these key features. All right, that's it. Have a great one. Bye.